I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm talking with Ryan White, the director of the documentary Good Night Oppy, as part of our Meet the Experts film documentary panel. First thing I wanted to ask you about this was, what's interesting about the movie is that there are these wonderful recreations of what the rovers on Mars looked like when they were on there doing their work. And I was curious, were you nervous about, having the film rely on visual effects recreations of the rovers?
I wasn't nervous about relying on it. I was nervous about entering a world of filmmaking that I had never done before, which is visual effects. But what I learned very quickly in working with Industrial Light and Magic, who did the visual effects in Good Night Oppy, is that they love information. They love facts. And so those visual effects that you see in our film are completely rooted in the photography of the robots. So each robot, my documentary is about two twin sister robots, Spirit and Opportunity. Each of them had 9 cameras on them during their lifetimes. And so that was hundreds of thousands of photos over the course of those lives that they took. And there's also 2 orbiters that are satellites that roam around Mars, taking photos down on the terrain. So we know at this point exactly what Mars looks like. It had just never been brought to life in a photoreal way in a film before. So that was my initial conversation with Industrial Light and Magic was like, is this even possible? Can you take all of this photography and information that we have and create a completely photoreal, authentic Mars, essentially make it move, because we have the photographs. And, that is a very long process. As a documentary filmmaker, as I'm sure a lot of the panelists will speak about, most of us tend to be very run and gun. Most of my films are, but this was visual effects that were going to take over a year to create. So it had to be prescribed very early on what those scenes were going to be in the film. And then 6 months ago, sitting in a movie theater as we're getting the final renders in was one of the best filmmaking experiences I've ever had, just watching that come alive in front of our eyes.
You also have a wonderful casting choice in the movie for the voiceover of the main voiceover that we hear in Angela Bassett. And I was wondering what made you choose Angela Bassett as the main voiceover performer for this?
Well, the little gay boy in Georgia growing up saw What's Love Got to Do with It, I think 4 or 5 times in the movie theater. So I'm a huge Angela Bassett fan, always have been, not exaggerating. That was the voice I had in my head the entire time I was making the film. So for a year and a half, it was my production assistant, James Robinson. It was his voice reading the Rover diaries, but Angela was always what I wanted to have in the final film. So she's reading a lot. I've seen a lot of people write about it as narration, but like I didn't write those words that Angela is reading in my film. They are daily diaries that someone at NASA wrote while the rover is in some sort of crisis or some sort of discovery. And so for me, that's normally a documentary filmmaker, and I don't really make historical films or retrospective films. Once I discovered that was written every day, it was a way, I thought, as a narrative device to keep the audience on the journey day to day with the robot. So it's not looking back and knowing that they died, which they did, spoiler alert, but it's a way throughout the course of the film to keep you on that day-to-day adventure. And so when we reached out to Angela, I was certain that she would say no. Like, I don't do documentaries, or no, I won't be in your little Mars film. And she said yes right away. It was the next day we got a yes from her. And recording with Angela was was such a joy. We had an amazing sound designer, Mark Mangini, who also did, Mad Max Fury Road. He did Dune. He did the Star Trek films. And we recorded Angela in a way that's different to everyone else in my film. And so there were microphones all around Angela while she was reading those diaries. So if you see the film in a theater, she's coming from everywhere.
So I was wondering, have there been any reactions to the film from audiences that have genuinely surprised you in their reaction to this movie?
Well, literally before this panel, that's why I was a couple minutes late. I was doing a Q&A with 800 fourth graders. But I also went to a screening in San Francisco. I mean, I think it's just a few days ago. Everything's a blur right now, where I went in and I didn't realize who the screening was for. And I was just going to do a Q&A. And as I walked in with Jess, my producing partner, it was like really loud. Like people were talking as we walked in. And I was like, oh, this is an awful screening. People are just like talking during our movie. And then like a bright shot came on and I was able to look at the audience, and it was all students. It was all public school students from San Francisco that they had brought for an educational screening in San Francisco. And it was incredible to watch. Like they were so loud. I was only there for the last 30 minutes of the film, but like when Opportunity discovers water or when she takes her selfie, they were like standing up and screaming and high-fiving each other during those scenes. And the final 5 minutes of my film, as Perseverance, the latest rover, launches, is the end of my film as she launches into space. They were just all standing and cheering. And normally that would be horrifying because it's the final 5 minutes of your film and you could hear none of the dialogue, none of the sound design. But Jess and I had like tears rolling down because the idea, I it's so rare as a documentary filmmaker, and I've never made a film that's appropriate for young audiences. And so to have made something that can have an audience that extends down to, fourth grade, fifth grade, has been really thrilling. So I think those were the screenings, nothing against adults, but I think those are the screenings that will stand out in the end.
That actually, I want to piggyback off that because one of the things I was also curious about is, it often feels like the idea of pursuing careers in engineering and space exploration that are linked to like space exploration are they're not as pursued as they used to be. And I was wondering if you hope that this film can help steer younger people to possibly pursue a career in one of those fields that could land them at NASA and help further space exploration.
Absolutely. I mean, I think more so than any film I've ever made, I was conscious of the audience in this film. And like I was a total nerd growing up. I went to a math and science nerdy school. I wanted to be an astronaut and it never happened. And, even one of my best friends is an astrophysicist now. And so I know what it's like to be around those types of people that aspire to do those types of things. But we were very conscious in the film of making sure, there's only 11 human beings in my film. And kind of by happenstance, but a little bit by design, almost all of them are outsiders in some type of way. It's not all Americans. It's a lot of international people that work on these missions, even though it's NASA. And we wanted to be very careful in deciding, you have to be judicious. Every documentary filmmaker does on how many voices you include. So if you can only include, I think it began as 8 and we extended it to 11 people. We wanted kids that might see this film to see themselves represented on screen. And I was doing press yesterday with a lot of Indian outlets. And there's an Indian woman in this film who's from rural India, and she got a book from a family member when she was 5. There was a book about space, and it changed the trajectory of her entire life. And now she works for NASA as a rover driver. And the Indian press was so excited to talk about her being in my film and what an important role she plays on this missions. And so that's just one example, but we were very conscious, like if a young Indian girl is watching this film, that she will see that it's possible to go into this field, even though it might feel impossible wherever she is right now.
And just one last question very quickly. Were there any other Rover wake-up songs that weren't mentioned in the film, but that you found particularly amusing?
No, so the rovers were only supposed to last for 90 days. So that's 2 rovers. That would be 180 wake-up songs. Spirit lasted 7.5 years and Opportunity lasted 15 years. So when you do that math, it's thousands of wake-up songs. So we had basically any song that's ever been written was an option for a wake up song. And it definitely was one of the bigger challenges in making this film, was having to, like, of course, Bowie's Life on Mars was a wake up song. It's a film about Mars. When we finally cut that scene where it was used, it was devastating because I love Bowie. I love that song. But eventually it came down to, if a scene was really great and we found that music being played in a room and it was an essential scene to the film, we ended up favoring that one over others. And I won't say which. There's seven very famous songs in my film. I won't say which, but there's a couple of them that are songs that I just do not enjoy and have never enjoyed. And the fact that they were chosen over like a Bowie song still kills me to this day. But the song was used in a way that was so essential to the story that we took the plunge.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Thank you so much for having me.